I killed God in my writings so that man would no longer have an excuse for his weakness. Salome got engaged to Paul just to break my heart, leaving me to suffer the aftermath alone as usual. The Übermensch, Overman, is not a race, nor is it the blonde German, as my sister and the Nazis tried to portray. That is utter nonsense.
This is incredibly difficult for people, especially in our current age. This era is filled with distractions and all the kind of entertainment.
I saw that religion was exploited by the powerful to consolidate their legitimacy and by the clergy to solidify their rule.
Or maybe because of your mustache. Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Our guest for today is a philosopher surrounded by countless question marks because his idea have been profoundly misunderstood. And that's why we are hosting him today to know and learn about him through his own words. So please join me in welcoming the world-renowned philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Welcome, Friedrich, and how are you?
Hello, and thank you for having me today.
It's really an honor to have you today. Now, to begin, we would like to know why most of your ideas was so misunderstood. Was it due to your style of writing, or your ambiguity, or something else entirely?
When you read me through the eyes of the world, you will see an angry, misogynistic philosopher, accused of atheism, who despises all other thinkers. My most infamous fans, those who claim to be influenced by my writings, include figures like Adolf Hitler, who regarded me as the philosopher of Nazism and twisted my concepts to proclaim Aryan supremacy, identifying it as the Übermensch, Overman, I envisioned. This is entirely false. It is easy to label me a hater of women, and you will find evidence in my words to support that. But the question you must ask is, which woman exactly do I hate? It is easy to see me as someone who despises weakness, but your question should be, what is my definition of weakness? And while you may consider me an atheist, you must first understand the form of religiosity in which I lost my faith over time. Therefore, when you try to understand me through what people say about me, you are only getting closer to those people, not to me. Even attempting to reach me through my own words will likely end with you projecting your own life onto them, leading to an inaccurate stance, especially since my writing is poetic, metaphorical, and intentionally multifaceted. Only one path remains to truly understand me. As you read my words, you must read my experience. You must understand whom I was addressing and what emotions drove me to say what I did. You must know my people and the society that caused my despair and solitude, the ones I wanted to retreat from by climbing the mountain, only to return and tell them, "You are more ape than any ape." When you begin to learn about my life, you realize that it is impossible to fully comprehend me without taking my lived reality into account.
And that's precisely why we have brought you here today to talk us through your entire life, your philosophy, and the misconceptions people have held about your ideas. And please take all the time you need.
I was born into a simple family, to a mother and father who loved each other. I was the eldest son, followed by my sister, Elisabeth, and then my younger brother, Ludwig. My father was a man of the cloth, a pastor in one of the local churches. Life was going well for me until my father was diagnosed with a serious brain disease. It caused him excruciating pain during his final years, which he spent unable to perform the basic tasks of life due to the agony. I watched all of this as a 4-year-old child. I witnessed my father's health deteriorate until his death. Unfortunately, my first shock in dealing with the disease that claimed my young father's life was not something could gradually overcome. Instead, it was just the beginning. A beginning where I became acquainted with illness from the moment I opened my eyes to the world until the day one die. My father passed away in that manner, and just a few months later, my little brother also died at the age of 2 from an unexpected illness. Of my beautiful family, my sister Elisabeth and my mother remained. When I started school, my teachers described me as an emotionless child, saying I'm much older than my actual age.
Were you described as being emotionless because of the trauma caused by the death of your father and your brother?
My friend, I was not emotionless as they claimed. The truth is, I was a combustible mass of emotions, deprivation, and suffering. Trauma does not kill feelings, it transforms them into silence. A child who watches death snatch away the strongest man in his life, only to be followed by his little brother, does not have the luxury of crying like other children. My silence was a fortress, not an emptiness. My teachers saw the stillness on my face, but they could not see the volcano erupting in my chest. At the age of 4, I learned that the world is not a safe place, and that strength is the only way to survive. This was the beginning of my journey in sanctifying strength because I tasted the bitterness of weakness far too early.
But were you able to form any friendship at that age so that you wouldn't have to be so alone?
At that age, I was still able to form friendships. Sometime after the death of my father and little brother, my mother decided to leave the city and move back to her hometown to be near her siblings. What was strange about me back then was the amount of resilience I showed toward a life that had thrown its harshest realities in my face while I was still a child. I was a very positive child. I finished primary school with excellence and later studied Christian theology, enrolling in a Christian high school as if I intended to follow in my father's religious footsteps and as if my faith was the meaning driving me at the time. Later, I decided to continue my theological studies at the University of Bonn, but my experience there was unsuccessful. Perhaps it was because my professors were frustrated by my constant debating throughout my studies. Yet for 2 years, never ceased my attempts to integrate into society and find a role and companionship for myself. I even tried once to join the university's music circle, but failed to adapt there as well.
What kind of arguments were you having with your teacher that led to such a breakdown in your relationship at the university?
The professors at the University of Bonn wanted guardians of the texts, not examiners of them. The reason for our constant debating wasn't a lack of respect on my part. It was because I began to treat sacred texts as philological and historical documents, rather than divine revelation beyond reproach. I asked them questions they didn't have the courage to answer. How can we trust the accuracy of these translations? Isn't it possible that the Church altered these concepts over centuries to suit its own power? The professors idolized the past because it was comfortable, while was digging into that past with my hammer to expose the fragility hidden behind it. They saw me as a rebel, but the truth is I was simply far too honest in an age that thrived on sacred lies.
That sounds familiar. Universities today are no difference. But moving on, what was the next chapter in your life?
At that moment, my existential crisis reached its peak. Repeated failures and a soul-crushing sense of estrangement left me wondering, was I cursed?
Or maybe because of your mustache? I'm sorry. Go on. I'm sorry.
I realized I didn't belong, and doubt began to gnaw at my Christian certainty. When I decided to leave the university, my mother and sister confronted me with harsh words, questioning my faith, and they were right. From that moment on, I lost my last warm sanctuary, and my relationship with Elisabeth and my mother soured forever. Yet amidst this wreckage, in a second-hand bookstore in Leipzig, my eyes fell upon The World as Will and Representation by Arthur Schopenhauer. The moment I opened its pages, I felt as if I had found a mirror for my tortured soul. Schopenhauer taught me that the world is not reason or mercy, but a blind, painful will. This book became the new meaning that saved me from nothingness, transforming my despair over failing to adapt into the strength to seek a truth other than the one had been taught.
And speaking of Schopenhauer, we've already covered him in a previous episode. If you like, go check that out. And back to you, Mr. Frederick. Please go on.
At the University of Leipzig, I began rebuilding my life upon the ruins of the past. Although I was losing my faith in God in the heart of 19th century religious Germany, I possessed an iron will to succeed. I graduated at the top of my class, and in an unprecedented achievement, I was appointed as a professor at the University of Basel at the age of only 24, becoming the youngest professor in its history. I was a devoted teacher and a man overflowing with humanity. I even volunteered to care for the sick in local hospitals. Yet life rewarded my kindness with a devastating blow. I contracted an infection at the hospital that shattered my health. By the age of 34, one was forced to resign from the university and live with chronic, incurable pain for the rest of my life. As for the emotional void left by losing God, I tried to fill it with love, but I was rejected by every woman I approached. Perhaps my mustache was the obstacle.
Mr. Frederick, how did you survive such a fall to go from being the youngest professor in history to being unemployed and ill and all alone at 34? Was this collapse the necessary price for Nietzsche, the philosopher, to be born free from the constraints of academia?
Even though I suffered from illness far more than I enjoyed health, I never believed that philosophy should be a byproduct of sickness or agony. Despite all that pain, I didn't evaluate the world through the lens of a patient. Instead, my illness helped me, as a philosopher, to view health from a different perspective, and during my moments of health, to view illness from a unique vantage point as well. After weeks of being bedridden, I would wake up feeling a surge of health that made me capable of reading, writing, and going out to talk to people again as if I had just been born that very day. It felt as though life had been gifted to me anew, allowing me to see it with fresh eyes and awakened senses. I felt the gratitude of a man who refused to let pain blind him to the beauty of life's simplest details. It was as if everything had regained its divine magic in my sight. Those periods of recovery, where I felt the true quality and joy of existence, were the inspiration behind many of my work.
But Mr. Frederick, isn't it contradictory to prize power and the Overman while you yourself were bedridden? Is it the Overmensch a warrior of the body or a warrior of the spirit?
You have misunderstood me, my friend, if you think I am contradicting myself. You are confusing sickness of the body with sickness of the soul. My attack on the sick was never a self-insult, but rather born from my deep understanding of health as an act of will, not mere muscle. The Übermensch is not a muscular athlete, but a hero who transcends his suffering. A weak person is one who uses their pain to beg for pity. As for me, I turned my illness into a laboratory to see the world through a different, fresher lens. Great health is that which you reclaim after defeat. I would spend weeks bedridden, only to wake up as if born anew. Instead of letting pain overwhelm me, I transformed it into intellectual music. Weakness is saying, life is evil because I am suffering, while strength is looking at pain and saying, is that all you have? Then let us do it once more. I wrote my greatest ideas in the gay science during my recovery, because I possessed the power to transform the bitterness of illness into dancing golden thoughts. Can those with healthy bodies do the same?
That makes perfect sense. Now tell us about your love story. How did it all begin and what happened?
You have touched my deepest wound. The story began in Rome in 1882, when my friend Paul Ray introduced me to a young Russian woman named Lou Salomé. She wasn't just a woman, she was a hurricane of intellect. The moment I saw her, I didn't just see a beautiful face. I saw a rebellious soul that mirrored my own, and I said to her, "From what stars have we fallen to meet each other here?" I made a pact with two of my friends to take a year-long retreat, experimenting with a life of solitude, away from the hustle of people and the city. My companions were the writer Lou Salomé and the philosopher Paul Ray. We decided to rent a house in a remote location. Each of us had different goals, but we agreed on sharing a life with like-minded spirits and exploring shared solitude. But my joy was short-lived. Unfortunately, both my friend Paul and I fell in love with Salome. We spent the entire holiday trying to outdo each other. It reached the point where Paul proposed to her and she refused. I thought to myself, that's it. She rejected him because she wants me. So I proposed to her as well. And she rejected me too. I told myself, maybe she did that just to save my relationship with Paul, so we both face rejection together. So said to her, "Fine, Lou. You've rejected me now, so Paul won't be upset. What do you say now? Will you marry me?" She rejected me a second time. I persisted, and she rejected me a third time. Clearly, I didn't handle rejection well. I considered Lou Salomé the love of my life, and it was hard to accept her refusal. In the end, our trio faced so many difficulties that we cut the trip short and returned before the year was up. After that journey, Salome got engaged to Paul just to break my heart, leaving me to suffer the aftermath alone as usual. Curiously, Salome later wrote a biography about me, and one striking thing she mentioned was that there was something in my spiritual nature that was fundamentally pro-woman.
If Lou Salomé was right that you were fundamentally pro-women at heart, how did you explain the harsh and beating attacks on women in your later works? Were those cruel words merely a mask for a wounded man trying to rebuild his pride after being rejected by the only woman he considered his intellectual equal?
You have struck the core of the truth. My fierce attacks on women in my books were a mask and a shield for the wound Lou Salomé left behind. But behind that mask, my actions told a different story. Consider my relationship with my sister Elisabeth. Despite the fact that she was largely uneducated, having attended a school that taught nothing but cooking and how to catch a husband, never treated her as an inferior. I treated her with absolute equality. I was constantly recommending books for her to read, helping her build her own independent character and knowledge. This is the contradiction many fail to grasp. In my writings, I attacked the weakness that emotion could cause, but in my personal life, I championed the female intellect and respected its being, just as Lou observed in her biography of me.
Speaking of your sister Elizabeth, how did things turn out between you later on?
Oh, Elisabeth. She was the wound that never healed. I completely severed ties with her when she married Bernhard Förster, that fanatic who founded the Aryan colony New Germany in Paraguay. At the time, I sent her a scathing letter denouncing her actions and branding her as part of the anti-Semitic herd, an ideology I utterly loathed. But fate was cruel and ironic. After their colony failed and her husband took his own life, Elisabeth returned to Germany in 1890, burdened with debt, only to find me a broken shell after my mental collapse. Seeing my rising fame, she saw a golden opportunity. She decided to exploit my vulnerability and appointed herself the guardian of my intellectual legacy. She didn't just care for me. She forged my letters and distorted my books to fit her twisted nationalist ideology. She betrayed my mind, portraying me to the world as a philosopher of extremism, when in reality I was always nothing but an enemy of the herd.
So the Overmensch or the Overman you speak of is not restricted to a specific race or a particular group. In that case, who exactly is the Overmensch?
The Übermensch, Overman, is not a race, nor is it the blonde German, as my sister and the Nazis tried to portray. That is utter nonsense. The Overman is a state of being, not a specific group of people. He is the individual who has succeeded in transcending the traditional man within himself, the one who liberates himself from herd values, from fear, and from the religious and societal delusions that shackle the will. He is the one who creates his own values, who possesses the courage to say yes to life in all its pain and absurdity. He is the one who does not seek meaning in the heavens, but creates meaning right here on earth. The Overman is the child in my philosophy, one who plays and creates without the chains of the past. He is not a tyrant who enslaves others. He is a master who first masters himself and his own instincts. In short, the Overman is a bridge over an abyss, connecting the animal to a higher being that knows no bounds.
But this is incredibly difficult for people, especially in our current age. This era is filled with distractions and all the kind of entertainment.
You have accurately described what I feared and called the last man, der letzte Mensch. This is the exact opposite of the Übermensch. The last man is he who seeks only comfort, security, and cheap entertainment. He is the one who says, "We have invented happiness," and blinks, while drowning in his own insignificance. The distractions you speak of are a new kind of opium. They make you numb your pain instead of using it as fuel to rise. Time hasn't changed. Only the quality of the shackles has improved. The Overman of today is the one who has the courage to say no to his phone, no to public opinion, and no to the comfort that kills the soul. Difficulty is a virtue, not an obstacle. The more distractions there are, the more valuable the person who can master their attention and will becomes. Remember, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star.
And would you agree that achieving the Overmensch status today is a greater feat than in your time, given that the resistance we face from distractions and modern entertainment is much more intense?
You have understood the essence of my philosophy perfectly. Yes, the greater the resistance, the more strength is required to overcome it. In my time, I fought against priests and tradition, but in yours, you fight against algorithms, digital mirages, and an abundance that rots the will. The person today who can tear themselves away from this overwhelming tide of distractions to build their own world and create independent values is indeed a hero surpassing those of the past. You live in an age of soft nihilism, where ambition is killed by pleasure rather than pain. Therefore, whoever among you survives and becomes their own master is the closest thing to the Übermensch I dreamed of.
Now I want to learn about what is perhaps your most controversial and most distorted concept in the history of philosophy, the death of God.
The truth is, those who truly needed to hear my message were the masses living lives filled with heedlessness and animality, those who governed themselves by the laws of fear and weakness. That is why I didn't simply say, God is dead of my own accord. Rather, I told them, we have killed him. The idea of God was ever present within man. But instead of drawing the strength and courage needed to mend his life from that divine image, man drew only notions of weakness, fear, and a hollow patience for a wretched existence, patience that only made things worse. Consequently, in my view, humanity needed something new to break free from the prison it had built for itself. This is what I brought, a material religion capable of governing these masses, uniting them around laws that help them navigate their painful lives and interact with one another. I saw that religion was exploited by the powerful to consolidate their legitimacy and by the clergy to solidify their rule. Over time, this produced an even worse kind of human, a being regressing in his humanity to the point where, as I say, he began to compete with the ape in his apishness.
You say we killed God, and yet you come from a deeply religious background. As a pastor's son, how did you personally move from faith to such a radical form of atheism?
Exactly. And that is precisely why my cry was so thunderous, because I was no stranger to that world. I am the son of a pastor, the grandson of two pastors, and I grew up in a home that breathed theology. I did not leave the faith because was ignorant of it, but because I knew it far too well.
So, have you become an atheist?
The word atheist is far too narrow to describe me. It belongs to an era of superficial conflicts. Certainly, I do not believe in the God created by the herd as an escape from their responsibilities. But does that mean I am without faith? I did not tear down the old idols to leave man in a void, but to put the Übermensch in their place. My atheism is not a denial of the sacred, but a sanctification of the earth instead of the heavens. I killed God in my writings so that man would no longer have an excuse for his weakness, so that he would be forced to become a God himself to justify his existence. If you call someone who refuses to be a slave an atheist, then yes, I am. But I am an atheist with a religion called life, a prophet called will, and a heaven that exists only in the moments of triumph over oneself.
And even during your lifetime, you were misunderstood. For instance, when you wrote "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," you subtitled it "A Book for All and None." What did you mean by that?
This wasn't the first time I accused everyone of misunderstanding me. Indeed, that was my constant reality. Even in moments when I received praise, I would smile bitterly and write in Beyond Good and Evil, one is not understood, and for that reason, one is praised. People were praising the mask they saw, not the truth I penned. Solitude was not merely a fate, it was the dominant sensation of my entire existence. It was what led me to the moment of Zarathustra, where I wrote as if I were in a world inhabited by no one but myself, as if I were literally engaged in a bloody brawl with my own soul. I was convinced that anyone who dared to offer an opinion on my work was inevitably wrong, simply because they lived in an entirely different world from mine, the world of the herd, where the vibrations of my silence and the screams of my wounds could never reach. My advice to you in this world that tries to turn you into mere numbers is this: obey no one, follow no one. Instead, be your own law. Happiness is not found in comfort, but in the feeling that your power is growing, that you are overcoming an obstacle. Do not fear the chaos within your souls, for only from it can dancing stars be born. And if you taste the bitterness of life, remember that the most precious diamonds are those that endured the greatest pressure. Be hard, be honest, and above all, be the masters of your own destiny.
I will end our talk with your own words and a quote. You say, I have learned to walk, since then I have run. Thank you for teaching us how to walk away from the herd. May your solitude be profound. And thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.